Welcome, everyone, to the Noble Just Bacon podcast. I am your host, Dr. Allan, and with me here today is Coach Beth to answer all of your burning health and fitness questions from around the social media world. This is a rapid fire episode, and we have a ton of great topics to cover, so let's get rolling. First up on the docket today, getting adequate fiber from fruits, veggies, and high fiber tortillas is still an issue. What am I missing? Typically, when people have issues getting their fiber intakes, it's the choices of fruits and veggies that they're making, or they're just not using, the right kinds of high fiber tortillas. In fact, we found some on the market that have up to 18 grams of fiber within a single tortilla. I believe that there is a list that we have around with the highest fiber containing foods. There's a lot of really good choices. Beans, lentils, split peas can be a really high amount target. I mean, black beans themselves have about 15 grams per cup. If we're talking fruits, raspberries, blackberries, pears with the skin, apples with the skin, and bananas are probably the highest amounts. But usually what's that?
Kiwis with the skin.
Kiwis
So
with the skin.
that's a huge hack that nobody ever thinks about, and people get grossed out by that because kiwis are fuzzy. Although if you wash them, you can get a decent amount of that fuzz off. But the skin on a kiwi is insanely fibrous, and they also make those gold kiwis that have the smooth skin, and those are also extremely high in fiber.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the nutrients are in a lot of these fruits and vegetables anyway. So this is one of the things that when we discuss, you'll hear online where people will say, oh, juices are bad for you. These are the types of things that can cause some of these problems. When they're talking about this, they're not typically talking about blended like smoothies. They're talking about pressed juices.
Yeah.
Pressed juices can become problematic from these types of standpoints because it's essentially just the concentrated sugar water, and not to fearmonger sugar or anything like that, but you lose a lot of the nutrients when you lose the skin, you lose some of the other constituents of the fruit itself. And so blending up some of these fruits is a way to be able to get more of these in a way that's palatable for a lot of people. So if you're somebody that really enjoys smoothies, getting a Vitamix and being able to blend a bunch of these things up, blending up some arugula, some spinach. I mean, I put that in with my smoothies as well to add some more nutrients, can be a really beneficial thing. And it doesn't take away from the benefits that these fruits provide. And I know that there was fear mongering going around for quite a while in the social media space, where some of the bigger influencers were saying, well, if you blend up these fruits, you're going to cause something bad with your insulin, a higher insulin spike. And they actually found that it was the exact opposite, because when you started blending these fruits, it actually allowed you to utilize a bit more of the fiber, and it actually lowers blood glucose rather than raising it comparative to just eating the fruit itself. Not that that's a major issue for people, but I know that there is some thought pattern around people being concerned around smoothies for whatever reason. But beyond the total calorie count and whether it fits within your day, it's a healthy choice, by and large. And it is one of the easier ways to get in a good amount of fiber. All right, moving on. How do you determine the quantity of carbs you actually need for your lifestyle? So carbs are an interesting topic, and it is another one that is highly controversial for whatever reason. And one of the big things that we've seen over the decades is carbs become vilified, and then fats become vilified, and then we kind of cycle back and forth until the end of time. But carbs are an interesting topic because they're a non-essential macronutrient. You can survive just fine without them. That doesn't mean that they don't provide benefits. So when people say, well, how do I determine what I need for my lifestyle? The answer is, for most people, as much as you can fit while also still hitting your calories, hitting your protein needs, and hitting your fat minimums. And carbs themselves, particularly if you are looking to build lean muscle, are an important addition. And this is something that a lot of people essentially forego because they think, okay, well, if I add more carbs into my life, I'm going to be increasing my chances of gaining fat. But as long as calories are controlled, getting in more carbs within that calorie allotment can be a beneficial thing. And I've talked about in the past that when we're trying to maximize lean muscle building, what we see in the research currently is 3 to 8 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight per day is the sweet spot for max growth. That's a lot. And it's particularly a lot for people that are in cutting scenarios. And so you do the best that you can. So when people ask the question, well, where should my carbs be? The answer is it should be where you can get the most that's sustainable, that allows you to eat a significant amount of your daily intake through fruits and veggies and then whole grains and go from there. Should I wear a mouth guard for heavy lifting such as deadlifts and squats? This sounds like a dumb question. A lot of times when people ask this, I get other people that kind of laugh at the response here. But there has been studies done on people in heavy lifting, and it suggests that having something like a mouth guard can aid in maximal strength. There's something about being able to bite down on something that can be beneficial for the nervous system. And the reason that you use the mouth guard in place is you don't damage your teeth. So is it something that would be a good investment, a sports guard of some kind, if you're going to be maximally lifting, if you're going to be doing something like powerlifting, if you're going to be doing a significant amount of deadlifts or heavy squats? Yeah, it could be a good use of your funds. It is something that has been backed in various research. What are your thoughts on body composition scans? This is a testy subject for a lot of people. People love getting their in bodies. They love getting their DEXAs. They love getting anything that they can pay money for, as long as it gives them some data. And this transfers over to all those different things like Aura rings and, the special watches that are out there. But specifically for body composition, we have to be aware of the limitations of these devices that are essentially trying to tell you your body fat percentage, your lean mass, and the changes inherent whenever you're taking these readings. In bodies and those scales that you stand on at home use something called bioelectrical impedance analysis. That's BIA. BIA is something that is so error prone, you typically won't even use it in research. It's too broad of an error. It is anywhere between maybe 8, 9, even 10% off in both directions. So you could be a 30% body fat person, but it could say you're 39 or it could say you're 21. And the standardization between the readings is not, it's not there. I mean, you can't even tell change. So from one reading to the next, it's not like, well, I had 5% error plus error in that first reading. I'm going to have 5% plus error in that second reading. No, it can vary. And so we can get dramatically different readings depending on when these are being taken. And so these scans can become something that is very self-defeating for a lot of people because they may be moving in the right direction. You might have, very distinct signs of progress. Your scale weight is moving in the right direction. Your measurements are moving in the right direction. Your performance in the gym is moving in the right direction, but it tells you you've lost 2% muscle, or it tells you you've gained 1% body fat. When in reality, you could think, okay, well, I look better in the mirror. This becomes something that is a very negative thing in people's lives. And they get really focused on this. And they say, oh, well, I believe that that there's some error here, but it can't be that bad because InBody or whoever is putting these out will say, okay, well, we've got a 1% error population wide. And that sounds really good. The problem with that is it's an average of over 100,000 people. And when you average so many large errors together, in instances like this, it comes into a small overall error. So if you get a +9 on one person and a -8 on one person, you can claim that this is a 1% error because you add the two together, divide by two. And so this is something that is very deceiving for people, and people really will hinge their signs of success on this. And this is one of the reasons that even with our clients, we try to tell people stay away from these as much as possible. Just use scale weight, just use a variety of different measurements to be able to get some information about what's going on in your fitness journey, and then pay attention to performance. If you're following those, you'll be able to tell what's going on over time without any issue. If you're using these things like InBody or BIA, you're going to have some real problems because it's going to be kicking out data you can't trust. And so the next step up, people will say, well, I'm going to do a DEXA scan. And DEXAs can be a decent proxy for bone density. But even still, even the fact that we use DEXA a lot in research, there's still a 3 to maybe 4 or 5% error. And so until you go beyond those bounds, you can't tell that you've moved 1%. So if you start out at 25%, until you get to about 21 or so, you can't tell if you've moved 1% in the right body fat direction. So this is something that if you're going to get it done, I would recommend DEXA by far over InBody or any of the at-home scales. And then I would give it at least 6 or 8 months in between readings. I would not be getting these readings regularly, which means you can't use them to program for your nutrition anyways. And so because you can't use them to program for your nutrition, it just kind of makes them a waste of money. And
Yeah, and you have to, you have to pay for them. So
yeah. Yeah. And so it just becomes one of those things that there's no practical reason to be doing this. Do you think that you're looking better in your progress photos? Are you happy with, are you looking better in the mirror? Are you having other signs of success? Use those. It makes life a lot easier.
I've never understood the attraction of understanding of knowing what your body fat, like a specific body fat percentage is. I've never been able to like identify with people who use that metric for anything.
Yeah, because the question becomes, okay, well, you're in your own skin, you're looking at your own progress pictures, you're looking at the mirror. If this told you 21%, are you done today?
Exactly. Or if you feel like you're looking amazing and your clothes are fitting better and your performance is awesome, but then your DEXA scan or your InBody scan tells you you're 28% body fat and now you feel like a piece of shit, and that's why I just don't get it. Like what is the attraction to that specific percentage number? Like I will never understand why people want to even get these things done in the first place, because it's not gonna, that information can't and really shouldn't be used for anything.
No, it's never going to be beneficial.
No.
And so it goes from, that's the problem with these things, is that it goes from, okay, when it tells you what you want to hear, you're at baseline. When it tells you what you don't want to hear, you're now in the dumps.
Right.
And so there's never a good answer from it. It's either, okay, things are working like I thought that they should be, or nothing's working.
Right.
It's never like, oh, things are wonderful, because even if it said, like, if you're a woman and you're, and it says like 19%, but you look at yourself and you know that you're like high 20s, you're not happy. So like the low number's never going to make you happy. The high number's always going to make you mad. And so it never works out in the right way. And this is the same conversation that we have about those sleep trackers. Those sleep trackers can't tell anything. How do you feel when you wake up? Do you feel recovered? If you don't feel recovered, well, that's where you know something's off. You don't need a machine to tell you that you feel not recovered.
Yeah.
And so this all becomes some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, but only in the negative direction, because we never remember the positives. We only remember the negatives. And so this kind of pushes us into that, back into a corner. And so, DEXA is certainly a lot better than InBody. Upwards of, if we're going to look at the very best possible outcomes as far as the data goes, 3% margin of error in both directions, which is the reason that it's used in research is because the only next step up that you really have is to do something like MRI. And that just becomes too cost prohibitive. So people will say, well, that's what research uses. Research doesn't use it because it's the best. They use it because it's the best that's also kind of affordable. Mm-hmm. And so you're still not using it in research to like program anybody's nutrition. You're not using it to program anybody's training. You're literally just using it to have some data endpoints if you don't have things alongside it like muscle biopsies or or MRI or whatever it is. Because I mean, can you imagine putting like 60 people through multiple MRIs across a study? Like it's ridiculous. And so nobody's going to do that. So this is basically the best of what we have, but that's not necessarily the best thing. And one of the reasons that I think that people get this confusion about bioelectrical impedance, the in-bodies and stuff like that, because they think that it's actually attempting to assess body fat and um, and lean muscle directly. And that's not what it's doing. It's actually making an estimate of an estimate, because what it's doing is there's a thing called hydrostatic weighing where you do the weighing within, a water displacement tub, right? BIA is they come up with an equation that tries to guess what the equation for hydrostatic weighing is saying. And so it's a guesstimate of a guesstimate. And that's why this error is so compounded by the time you get these at-home scales, or the in-bodies, is because it's one, not directly assessing it, but not only is it one guesstimate removed, it's actually two guesstimates removed. And so that's really bad. And so one of the issues with this is that the way that this works, to even before it's being thrown into these equations, is it's passing an electrical current through your body. And this current follows the path of least resistance. I mean, it could go up one leg and down the other. It could go from one arm to the other, depending on how it's being read. It's going to, pass through internal tissues, and body fat is sometimes a harder tissue to get through than some other ones. And so sometimes it can miss significant portions of what's in your body. And essentially you think that you're looking at, okay, well, this is a breakdown of my body fat percentage and my lean muscle percentage, but it's a breakdown of like the lower three-fourths of your body and not the upper, or inverse, or maybe it's even less than that. And so this issue with the data that it's pulling is not necessarily complete. And then it's a guesstimate on a guesstimate. I mean, all of these things really add up. And if you understand that, you kind of get an idea of, okay, well, this is why none of this stuff ever actually gives me some good information. Do you agree with walking 10 minutes after meals, even if you've lifted and gotten in your steps? This trend of walking after you've eaten has really started to take off probably in the last 6 months to a year. And it's been pushed by people that are talking about glucose control from meals. And it's interesting because it's 100% true. If you walk after a meal, it does lower your postprandial, your post-meal glucose spike. The real question when people are asking this is this going to make a difference in my health? If you don't have metabolic concerns, you don't have diabetes, you don't have any of these other issues, it's really not going to make much of a difference. But it is nice in that it gets you steps, it keeps you active. So if this is something that can be beneficial for you from a movement standpoint, yeah, absolutely incorporate this. If you were doing this because you think that you need to control your blood sugar, it's probably a waste of time. There's no reason for you to necessarily have to micromanage your blood sugar if you're a normal person and you don't have any of these issues, but it can be a good habit to get into. So if that's a reason for you to get more active, fully support it. Is taking a DHEA supplement beneficial for women as they age? Um, this is pushed a lot recently. And there's some data suggesting it might be slightly helpful in treating depression and vaginal atrophy. But there is little evidence to support the anti-aging claims. And the issue that I have with it, and why I don't typically recommend it for anybody, is that it can cause some issues. It's got some serious potential side effects. It can increase the risk of hormone-sensitive cancers, including breast, ovarian, and even prostate in men. It might reduce your good cholesterol levels, and it could mess with mood disorders. The real issue with this is that it seems to raise serum testosterone levels for months, but not estrogen levels in women, which can cause acne, growth of facial hair, some of these other issues that women see under these situations. And, given the fact that the benefits don't really appear to be there, particularly for what they're being recommended for, and the side effects can be decently alarming, I would say skip this. What do you think is holding back most people from making muscle gains if their intensity is on point and they're training in the right volume and frequency? If intensity is on point, if people are working within proximity to failure, if you're getting adequate volume within a week, usually the two issues that people are going to be facing is inadequate nutrition and inadequate sleep.
Yep.
Inadequate nutrition is by far the biggest complicating factor whenever we have some of those problems. And the biggest issue that most people have is that they simply don't spend enough time eating enough calories. When building muscle is an important thing, you're going to need some extra calories, but people try to spend their entire lives in a calorie deficit. And this just is not the right atmosphere to essentially build lean muscle for significant periods of time. And so, as we've talked about in the past, the biggest thing for me when I'm talking with a lot of people and their goal is to really improve the quality of their physique, I would say spend at least half the year at maintenance, if not above. Spend more time with more calories, assuming you're not obese. Spend more time in these periods where your body can actually build this lean muscle that you're looking to build. Um, Sleep is important, but not nearly as important as that nutrition aspect. Anything to add there, Beth?
No, I mean, if there was one thing that I wish I could just say to every person, and specifically women, like I don't mean to like knock on women here, but we seem to be the ones who are the most afraid of gaining weight and gaining muscle. But then on the other hand, we're also the first ones to complain that we hate the way that our bodies look. And most women hate the way that their bodies look because they have zero muscle at all. They've never ever been in the weight room or haven't been in the weight room for a long time. They have spent no significant portion of their life in a caloric surplus, intentionally putting on muscle to then achieve the physique that they're so desperately seeking it in the mirror. Yet they won't do what they need to do in order to actually see that in the mirror. And it's really frustrating. And if there was one thing that I could say to a client like this, it's like you can't, if you're not willing to take that time to do dedicated builds, you cannot complain about what your physique looks like because you're not willing to do what you need to do to get your body to the place where you are going to be happy with what you see in the mirror. And unfortunately, what that means for most women is the scale is going to go up. You are going to have to buy larger clothes. You are going to be physically uncomfortable with the way that you look for a while before you get to a point where you can lose fat, strip off that fat, and finally see the physique that you want to see. And we're talking years of time. But the problem is these women spend their entire lives in either a calorie deficit or if they eat at maintenance, which they hardly ever do, they do it for like 6 months and then they freak out when the scale goes up by 2 pounds. And then they want to go back on a cut again. And so the cycle continues for decades and decades. And now I will get off my soapbox, but that drives me nuts.
Well, I think one of the things that you said there is really important and needs to be reiterated. I think that when you are a person that is looking to build significant amounts of lean muscle, whether you're a man or a woman, now this might be a more relevant complaint for women, but whether you're a man or a woman, having a second set of clothes is probably something that you should expect.
Yeah.
And like even I, just as an example, when I'm trying to get bigger, I actually have a second set of just rings for my hands because my rings don't fit me between like when I'm cutting and when I'm building. That's just even on like those small scales, things change in size. And just because you need a higher size of clothes doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong or that it's not working. That might be what you need to actually get to where you want to be. But it almost feels defeatist because everybody's been taught their entire lives, for women, the smaller size you have, the more worth that you have or the better that you're doing. And so, if you're not a 2 or a 4, you're doing something wrong. And I think that what really scares people, particularly women, particularly men who have lost significant amounts of body fat. I mean, anybody that has been obese in the past and has lost a significant amount of body fat, I have, at least anecdotally, have been very gun shy about gaining weight.
Yeah,
Even if
agreed.
they're finally in that position to where like gaining weight is what they need to do to continue to
Mhm.
improve their physique. It's just mentally and emotionally, I understand why
Yeah,
that's a very, very difficult thing. Um, but it might be proper expectations given the goals that you're trying to achieve.
yeah,
Um, and again, this is why some of those things that we would typically use as signs of success are better than others. And this is where you go to like performance and those types of things. But um, people that are constantly expecting, okay, well, I want to put on a bunch of, lean muscles so my I get a bigger booty, so I get better looking quads. Well, your pant size is probably going to go up. Like, why wouldn't that make
well, why wouldn't
sense?
it? And why wouldn't it? Like
Right.
I had this chat with a client who, she was upset that, she's like, am I permanently going to be a larger size? And I said, why would you expect if you have gained muscle from your previous physique, if you have gained mass, why would you expect to ever go back to your previous size? Now you can potentially, but why is that the expectation that you're going to go from a size 2 building all this muscle to end up back at a size 2? Why are you expecting that? Like
Yeah.
it just like the irrational, like the irrationality part of it to me just like boggles my mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, you can't go back to something if you've changed it. Like you're not the same person anymore. And you might end up like I've had plenty of clients who've done a build and like their waist ends up smaller. Like their quads might actually end up larger and they had to go up a pant size to accommodate their quads and their butt. But they then have to get the waist usually taken in at a tailor and the waist is probably from, would be equitable to a size 2. But the actual pant size that they had to buy to accommodate their new quads and their new butt was maybe a size 6. So, like, you can't, y'all got to think rationally. I can't.
Well, the other thing too is when people hear I'm going into, unfortunately, everybody still calls it a bulk. And that is like the biggest turnoff for people that really need to gain lean muscle. And that's why people started making up the marketing phrases of like clean build or lean bulk or like all these other things that mean absolutely nothing because they're literally just the same doing a bulk properly.
Yeah.
But this whole idea that like you have to get super fat to gain lean muscle is
Yes.
not true.
No.
But you're not going to have necessarily super distinct lines in between your abs while you're doing it at the same
Right.
time. And that's why we always say, okay, well, you're going to look a little bit fluffy, or maybe you'll have the outside of abs and not the inside. But that's a proper expectation. And it is what it is. And unfortunately, the only other option that you have is to stay closer to your maintenance level of calories while you're doing this, which can work. But then you're looking at many, many years
Years.
of years.
Years
Yeah. And
plural. And the changes are not. I have a client who is doing this right now. She does not, she's very adamant about not wanting to go in a build. She did it before and she gained a bunch of weight and it freaked her out. So I'm like, fine, but she wants to gain muscle. And so she's struggling right now mentally because she can feel the changes in her clothing. She can feel how that she is getting stronger in the gym, but she's not necessarily seeing it on her body yet. And she's only been doing this for about 6 months. But again, I'm like, this is what you're wanting to do, the way that you're wanting to do it. You're not going to see the changes. You will in 3 years from now look at photos of you from today and be like, oh my God, I look completely different. But because you live with yourself every day, you wake up, you see yourself in the mirror every day. She wants like tangible proof that what she's doing is working, and she's not going to get it. You're not going to
has
get
she
it
been
when
has
she
she
gets
been
up in the
talking
morning.
about doing like a body composition
No, no,
Okay.
no, no. But she like like her check-ins, she does get like she'll question like, my measurements aren't going up a ton yet, but I can feel she's like my clothes are tighter, like my she's not unhappy about that because she wants to build leg muscle in particular. She's like, so I know that we're doing the right thing. She's like, I just can't see it yet, so I'm really frustrated at how long that this is taking. And I'm like, I have told you no fewer than 25 times that this is going to take you 3+ years to do at the way that you want to do it. If you would let me put you into a build, we could get it done in a year and a half. But the way that you're wanting to do this, twice as long at a minimum.
Yeah.
Expect it. I said, so you're not going to see what you're expecting you should see. You're not going to see that for years.
Now, here is the one caveat that I will tell people. If, unless you're brand new to training where you can take advantage of like ungodly amounts of calories, you can. I mean, there was a study, Rosnick 2020, where they put people on 2,000 calorie surplus, and these guys,
God.
they were untrained males. They only gained lean mass. Did not gain any body fat at 2,000 calories. It's the most ridiculous example. I always bring it up because it's the most ridiculous example. It was a well-run study. It was an outlier study. It had multiple
Damn.
people within the program, but it was the reason that it was interesting is because most of the time they do these studies on these builds, they don't give them adequate volume in the training. And
Training.
so like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you really need good training alongside. So this is
Yeah.
where I'm going with this caveat. Unless you're brand new to training and like maybe you can fuck around a little bit more and some of those extra calories will still be used just fine. If you're outside of that first year, if you're outside of your newbie gains period, I would be hesitant to tell people to go full in on builds or bulks until you feel comfortable with I'm pushing my intensity correctly in the gym.
Agreed. Agreed.
Because when you start to add in a ton of calories and you're not pushing really hard in the gym, you're not giving the adaptation, you're not causing
Yeah.
the adaptation to actually build the muscle.
Yep.
And so relatively, you're going to be adding more body fat than what is acceptable. I mean, we accept that some is going to be in play, right? But we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're predominantly gaining body fat. And
Right.
so it's almost like a 1-to-1 ratio is like perfectly acceptable in a lot of cases outside of the beginner stage. But, like a 4-to-1 ratio is probably not if that's body fat is the four. And so it doesn't have to be that way. But this is why doing it under the guidance of a coach is probably a really good thing. And being conscious of the fact that you can't go in and like if this is something that you really want to do, you can't go in and just dial it in or phone it in for your training intensity. Like you really have to put in that work. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting those extra calories that you're getting in anyway. So, it works both ways. Like you can look at it as that's a bad thing. Like, oh no, I have to work really hard when I go into the gym. But you could say, well, maybe my goal right now isn't to go into like a full build, but maybe sometimes, we've got Halloween coming up, we've got Thanksgiving coming up, we've got Christmas and New Year's coming up. So we've got a lot of days where we're going to be getting in some extra calories. Maybe I know that I'm not going to not spend time with family or have some of these other things. So maybe I just dedicate myself to lifting really, really heavy and taking advantage of some of those extra calories in my diet. Like these time periods don't have to be things that set you back. They can be things that you use to actually take advantage of them. And if you know that you're going to be getting in these calories and like statistically, we see that the average person gains body fat between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Well, that means we know that we're getting extra calories. So maybe it's time to double down on that consistency and adherence to the gym. Maybe you don't take off because, oh, it's the holiday season and I just want to take off just to take off. No, I mean, you still enjoy your holiday activities that are coming up, but you double down on some of those things. You spend that hour 3 times per week or whatever it is to get into the gym and really knock those things out. And then those extra calories don't have to feel bad. You can say, okay, well, I might have gained a couple pounds, but as opposed to past years when I gained a couple pounds, this is not all body fat, half of it is muscle. And that's great. Like, let's do it that way, as opposed to looking at every time we're in a calorie surplus as some kind of thing that we should dread. Switch over the way that you're looking at your training and your performance and take advantage of these extra calories because you can certainly do that. And it makes life a lot less stressful. Will straps help with lifting? You said no to gloves, but I'm curious about straps. As a disclaimer, I don't hate on gloves. My concern with gloves are that it actually is kind of harder to grip with
Actually, I
gloves.
think it makes your grip worse, but
Yeah.
I don't think you know that unless you have trained extensively with both to actually feel the difference. But because when I first started lifting, when I was doing figure competitions and stuff, I used to use gloves all the time. And then when I stopped using gloves, I realized that I could actually hang on to the weight better
Yeah.
without gloves than with. But I wouldn't have come to that realization unless I'd actually taken them off, developed the calluses that I needed to develop in order to hang on to those weights. But I know that people use them to like prevent calluses, but like those calluses are there for a reason.
Yeah, and you know, as we've talked about in the past, they don't have to be like a really rough
They
thing.
don't have to be disgusting, like
Yeah,
especially if you, I mean, I still have them, but like they're shaved down. So they're not
yeah.
like, they're not gonna, they're not gonna, if I were to do a heavy deadlift, like they wouldn't tear or anything like that,
Mhm.
which is usually the sign that your calluses are overdeveloped, is if they tear. That means that you haven't been taking care of your hands.
Now, here's the one thing that I do want to point out. There are different bars that are
Mm,
made for different things. There are certain bars that have insanely aggressive knurling
curling, yeah.
in them. Those the little dotted diamonds on the grip
Yeah,
that act as grip. There
yeah.
are certain bars that even though we're saying you don't need gloves, this is nothing. There are certain bars that have very, very aggressive knurling. You will typically only find these in powerlifting gyms. If those are the bars that you have, your hands are probably going to be messed up a lot more than what we're suggesting they're going to be, because that really aggressive knurling really does mess with hands quite a bit.
It
But
does.
that's why you probably don't use that bar for the majority of your work, and maybe you only grab it for what that bar is specifically used for, and then maybe that's a
Competition bar usually
yeah, and then
for a
maybe
reason.
that's something that is used at only like super low reps.
Yeah.
And so it is, you should be conscious of that, the fact that that happens. Usually the people that have access to those bars kind of know that because it's more of a specialized bar. It's not a generic one that you find at the gym. So for our general answer, skip the gloves, even if you're starting out, even if you're a beginner, because you're going to want to one, get a feeling of the bar itself. Two, the issue that I have with gloves is that when your hands get sweaty, that glove shifts in relation to your hand. Whereas if you're
Yeah.
holding directly onto the bar, you can either just grip the bar or use some powder, some chalk, and then you don't have that bar shift like you
Yeah.
do with the gloves on. Now, straps, which was the original question here, straps are I would consider the only necessary piece of gym equipment outside of the weights themselves. I consider straps a necessary piece of gym equipment.
Agreed. I do too.
And it's the only one outside of a good pair of gym shoes, decent pair of straps. I mean, shit, straps are, you can spend $15 and get a pair of straps that'll last you many, many years.
Yeah.
And I do believe that it is a necessary piece of gym equipment for everybody.
Yep. Agreed.
And the reason being, your grip, your forearms should never be as strong as your back, your hamstrings, your glutes. Your glutes are, I believe, theoretically the biggest muscle on your body.
Mm.
Don't quote me on that. I think that that's from pure like volume. I think it's the biggest muscle on your body. Why would your forearms be as strong as that? Why would your forearms be as strong? I mean, there's a reason that like, you know, people can squat so much. There's a reason that these different types of movements are so dramatic. And so the way that you use these is you will literally use the straps themselves only when your grip has failed. If you're training correctly, you really want to fully work your target muscles for whatever movement you're trying to do. So correctly using straps means you're going to be doing the movement as much as you possibly can without the straps. And then when grip starts to fail and becomes the limiter on those movements, then you throw the straps on. Because your grip, if it is consistently failing at that point, your grip's shot. It's as trained as it's going to be trained. So you may as well continue on training your hamstrings, your back, your glutes, and fully finish those out, and not leaving progress on the table. Because for the people that are really diehard, I'm never going to use straps, you essentially are leaving progress on the table because
Yeah.
the limiter in your movements will almost certainly be your forearms. And if they're not, that's a sign that your glutes, your hamstrings, your back is probably weak.
Yeah, I was just gonna say if it's not, your back is weak. Your glutes are weak.
Mhm. And so that's something to really consider because it's, if you want to continue progressing as best as you possibly can, you don't want to use your weakest muscles as the guide of where you can go. You want to take the strongest muscles where they can go. You want to take the weaker muscles where they can go and let everything else work its way out. And if you do that by training with the straps the way that they're intended to be trained, you can do that straight up from basically the very beginning of your training all the way through. I don't really agree with the people that are like, oh, you shouldn't use straps, if you're new to training. I mean, if you need them, you need them. And, you know, limiting the rest of your progress is not really going to win you any awards in the end anyways.
Yep.
Okay, one last question. I was told you can't overeat protein. Your body will use it and not store it as fat. This is partially true in function. And this is a fun question to get into because when you try to overfeed in protein, there are protein overfeeding studies that show significant amounts of calories and extra just protein does not cause any significant fat gain. The problem with this in practice is most foods contain some other macronutrients with them. And if you are taking in more calories in the protein and utilizing that for different processes, you might store some more of the calories that you take in of fats and carbs. And so it shifts what what substrate is being stored a bit. So in practicality, trying to just focus on protein could lead you to having some more body fat if it's consistently upping your calories significantly. So it doesn't work out in exactly the same way as it would in some of these studies that use, special protein. Like they'll literally just use like egg whites and be like, here's all you can eat. I mean, nobody's really thinking, okay, well, if I can eat a whole lot of protein, I'm
A
just eating
ribeye.
a bunch of extra egg whites. Yeah. They're eating more chicken or they're eating more something else. And these all
Yeah.
come with other macronutrients that can add into body fat gain on top of the substrate shift that, extra calories of protein can put you into. So in a practical sense, eating more protein can work in a weight loss journey because eating more protein is probably something that most people need anyways. And it's decently satiating. So if you're choosing lean protein sources, it's probably displacing some of these higher calorie foods that you were eating otherwise. So it still does pretty much end up coming down to calories in versus calories out. But the practical aspect of it, it's just a little bit confusing when people look at this from a viewpoint of those protein overfeeding studies where they're using situations that aren't necessarily life realistic.
Yeah.
If you came to me and you're like, hey, Alan, what would happen if I added in an extra like 250 calories of just egg whites every day? It's probably not going to be a whole lot of extra body fat, if any. It's probably not going to be that much. But like, who is the person that's going to be doing that? It's not really going to
Not
happen.
me.
Yeah. So if I mean, think about all of the just protein foods that you can think of. I mean, there's not many.
There's not
And
many at all.
and so it's like highly um
Protein powder and egg whites. I mean, even
yeah,
protein
I
powder
was
is
I was
not
about to say
like
like
strictly protein.
highly filtered protein powders because
Yeah.
even whey concentrate's going to have
A little bit of carbohydrate. Yeah.
carbohydrates and fat and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so it's going to be a highly filtered version of whey protein. It's going to be egg whites to some
Ugh.
extent. So I always love throwing shrimp in there as one of those really good examples of the things that are like pretty much just protein. But there's not a whole lot of options. So in real life, this doesn't really work out in the way. So when people say, is this
Yeah.
true or false? It's true, but not for you. So it's not a fun thing for you.
Womp womp.
All right, that is it for us today. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of No Bull, Just Bacon. Reach out to us with your questions on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and our Mighty Networks community, and we will cover them in future episodes. See you later, guys.